Well, I love this space. This space is like walking into your living room. I thought it was so funny earlier when this little kid ran in and started making himself at home, and then he picked up one of the logs and tried to put it on the fake fireplace.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad he enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I have you here after a long day, and I'm glad that you were able to withstand that full day, and I thank you for staying, because we'd like to learn a lot about you and what you've been through and how you become the writer you are today, an illustrator. So you are an author and an illustrator, correct?
Yes. I'm currently in children's books. I am primarily an illustrator right now. However, I have submitted some books of my own, and I hope to have them out this coming year.
That's very exciting.
I currently write a blog with a psychiatrist, as a matter of fact, called Dr. Brilliant Cliche at WordPress, and I play the character of the Granny Doctor.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, yes. I give all of this sort of backwoods, out of the trenches advice to people while he's sitting there giving the clinical analysis of everything.
That's very interesting. So, Catherine Housley.
Yes.
Who are you, like from your core? Where were you born?
Okay, I was born in a little town outside of Buffalo, Clarence, New York. Where I grew up, and I was there until I came to Rhode Island in 1979. It was a little strange because when I went there, it was my 4th college, and I'd already dropped out of 3 colleges, gotten married, had a baby, gotten divorced, went back to school. So I was 26 years old, and here I was with all of these freshmen who were like 17 and 18 years old, and I felt a little out of place, just a little, but it was kind of a wake-up experience because they were all people who had basically had nothing happen to them yet and thought the sky was the limit. And, you know, I went in there feeling kind of like a little jaded at 26. Come on, I look back at that now and laugh. But I went in there feeling a little jaded, and sort of reinvigorated me.
So what brought you to the Rhode Island School of Design?
Okay, this is kind of strange. I just heard somebody talking about it, and they said, oh, it's one of the best design schools in the country. I said, I'm going to go there. And it was the only school I applied to, and I got in, went there on a scholarship, and actually at the point that I dropped out, and I was such an idiot to drop out, I think about this now, I had a full scholarship at RISD. I had everything, when I dropped out, covered for me, and I just decided, no, I have to play bass in a punk rock band.
No!
Yes, that's what I dropped out to do.
So you left your full scholarship behind?
Left my full scholarship behind to play bass in a punk rock band.
And what was the name of the punk band?
The Parents.
The Parents?
The Parents. I was in it with David Achenbach, who went on to do Small Factory, and he's also produced Lightning Bolt and Wheat, and John Orsi. It was a trio. And I played bass. I didn't even sing when the band first started, but I'd been in an all-woman band in Buffalo before I came here. So I was like looking for people to work with, and so I got involved with that. I've always been going back and forth between different areas of the art. Music, art, writing, film production, you know, the arts. Everything except something practical.
So what is it that you studied at RISD?
Sure. I was a sculpture major when I was first there, and I did a lot of conceptual art projects. Back when I was at RISD, conceptual art was like the big thing, and you know, you do these bizarre projects that you know, made absolutely no sense. It's like people were kind of into just being, oh, I'm creative, you know. Back then.
It was the creative thing to do.
Yeah, I didn't start getting into illustration a whole lot until I dropped out, and you know, that's basically how I've supported myself most of my life, is like with illustration, product design, you know, the arts.
So the arts have been good to you?
The thing is about being an artist, I run across so many people who go, oh, you're an artist. That must be so much fun. And I just feel like going, oh, oh, if you call going without health insurance, not being able to pay your mortgage, you know, like not having a job, having no idea what you're going to be doing, you know. But the thing is, if you don't leave yourself open for those opportunities, when they come, you can't take advantage of them. Like for instance, if I was working a full-time job, I never would have done this book. Because in order to do this book, I had to shut down my entire life for 3 months. And I mean, I didn't even go to the grocery store. I was like sending people, I can't leave the house, I'm on the book.
Wow, you were really focused on that project.
Yes, so you've got to starve, kind of. You can't fill something that's already full, so if you aren't empty, nothing can come in.
Do you have a lot of projects going on at once?
I usually have about 5 different projects going on at any given time, and it's kind of a matter of they're all floating, and every once in a while one of them lands. But usually like 5 of them land at the same time, and you're going crazy, tearing your hair out, and then when it's all done, you're like, oh my God, I'm out of a job again, you know? And it's kind of a constant thing like that, so.
So when you were doing Christmas Cats, that book came out when?
This came out September 29th in this last year.
It was last,
2011. Yep, 2011 was when it came out.
2012 now.
Yep.
Whew, time goes by fast.
I know. Oh my God, isn't it crazy?
So how did you land that particular job?
Total random crapshoot. It's like I sent out lots of samples. When I graduated from RISD, everybody sent out samples.
Wait a minute, you said you dropped out of RISD. Did you go back?
Oh no, I went. Yes, I went back.
Sorry, we missed that.
Yes, I did. I went back when I was in my 50s.
Wow.
Yeah, and finally got a degree. Went back, got a children's book illustration degree, and started sending samples out.
And it worked?
And Pelican actually sent me an email saying, you know, the art director saying, oh, I saw your work, and I noticed that you've done a book. Would you like to do one? You know, would you be interested in doing one for us? It was such a bizarre experience, though, I got to say, because I'm used to having opportunities disappear on me. You know what that's like as an artist. Somebody go, oh, I've got this great idea, and then somehow it just floats off into the ether.
Gone.
Yes, it's gone. And so these people didn't call me. They sent me an email, right? And I figured, oh, well, they're probably going to follow this up with a call. So I like didn't do anything, and then I realized, oh, wait a minute. I think I should get back to them because I just realized they're not calling me. And then, so I called them, but then they prefer to do things through email. It's kind of like dealing with the mafia, you know?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, so like we did some emails back and forth, and then the contract kind of disappeared for a while and then came back, and I kept thinking, is this a figment of my imagination? Is this really happening? And then when they finally asked me, like, you know, offered me the contract, I thought that when you got to the big time, right, it's like people would say, oh, well, we'll pay you this and this will happen. Oh no. It's like things were still nebulous. They said, well, what do you want for an advance? And I said, I'll call you back. And then I hung up the phone, and then I called everyone I knew. I said, I have no idea what to ask for in advance. It's like, I don't want to ask too much because then they won't let me do the book, but I don't want to ask for too little because I'll devalue myself. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? So I asked some actually insanely low amount, you know, just because I would have done anything to do this book. I would have killed at this point because the children's market is so closed down. It is almost impossible to infiltrate. If you have, you know, like no major league experience, for someone to actually offer you a contract, it's like, oh my God, Cecil B. DeMille came back from the grave and offered me a leading role in one of his movies. It's kind of like that. So I would do anything to do this contract, right? And so, interesting story. A couple weeks after I finally signed the contract, it finally happened. A sled dog ripped my arm out of the socket.
How did that happen?
I was walking a dog in Clarence. I went back to visit my, you know, some of my families in Clarence. And they have sled dogs, and I said, "Oh, I'll walk the dogs." And Tree, that's my my son's stepmother, very close with the family. She said, "Oh, I'm not sure you want to walk the dog." I said, "Oh, it won't be a problem." She said, "Well, be very, very careful." So I was very, very careful. I walked the dog, and I'm holding on with both hands. But then we get to this big open field, and Doggy is sitting next to me, and the birds are singing, and the sun is shining, and I'm looking around, and then all of a sudden I wake up, and I'm lying on the ground, covered in mud, and the dog had dragged me 10 feet. And my arm was ripped out of the socket. And I didn't even know it until I got back to Clarence, and suddenly my arms wasn't working. And I discovered that there's this fascinating mechanism in people where if something horrible happens to your body, you go into shock, and you can still continue functioning for like a day or so before it starts seizing up on you, long enough to get yourself to safety. And
That's a great mechanism.
Isn't it interesting? And then I went to my chiropractor, and he said, Catherine, I have bad news. You know, and I found out one of the tendons had been ripped right off the bone. And
let me guess, you're right-handed.
Right-handed, yes.
And you just had the contract ready to go.
Just had the contract ready to go. I never told the publishers. In fact, if they see this interview, they're going to have a heart attack, because they never would have given me the contract if I said, oh, by the way, a sled dog just ripped my arm out of the socket, and the doctors tell me I'll never use my arm again, but that's okay, I'm going to do the book. So I didn't tell them.
So how did you do it?
Well, while I was doing the book, I realized actually 2 weeks into it that the doctors were right. I was going to cripple myself if I did this book. But I decided I'm not going to stop anyway. So I started doing yoga religiously every morning and meditation for an hour and a half before I started working. And that's how I got myself through the book. I was getting more and more crippled, though. And at the end of the book, I couldn't lift my arm. And in this country, they told me it would cost about $30,000 to get fixed. I don't have health insurance. They'd have to surgically reattach the tendon. And so I went to Taiwan, where my family lives, and I got my arm fixed for $46.
$46?
I tell people this story and nobody can believe it. My daughter-in-law works in physical therapy clinic, and she got me a clinic card. They have national health care, and even visitors can get insanely cheap care. So I had 2 weeks worth of visits every morning, a half an hour with my own therapist, and an hour, an hour and a half in the clinic. $46 for the whole thing.
That is unbelievable.
But I got to tell you, you know why it works? In Taiwan, okay, in this country, you go to physical therapy, everybody goes, oh, it hurts. The therapist goes, oh, okay, we can stop. And in Taiwan, you go, oh, it hurts. They go, no, you must keep going.
It does not hurt. This does not hurt you.
No, you must keep going. I'm sitting there with tears streaming down my face, breaking out in a sweat. No, you must keep going. So they don't stop, so that's why it works.
So perseverance does work then?
Perseverance does work. Perseverance, and I've maintained that hour and a half of yoga every morning. It keeps me going, so.
I'll have to try yoga.
I swear to God, I don't even want to know what kind of shape I'd be in if I didn't do yoga every morning.
Wow. So how did you manage to illustrate that book?
Okay, I would work about 12 to 14 hours a day. And what I would do is I would work in increments. I'd work until I was breaking out in sweat, and the thing was on fire. And then I would go do physical therapy. And then I'd go back to it. And then I'd go do physical therapy. So all day long, essentially, all I did was art and physical therapy.
Now, did you work on that book in the United States or Taiwan?
I worked on it in the United States, yes. I did not leave my house for approximately 2.5 months.
So it took you 2.5 months to illustrate it. That's amazing. Despite your injuries.
Yeah, which is kind of unreal for a 32-page book with.
That is very unreal.
With full-page bleeds.
It took me a year to illustrate a 32-page book.
Let me just show you how all of these pages are in the book are.
Your colors are beautiful.
Yeah, they're full-page spreads. So that's like, and they were big. They were huge. They were like 11 by 17. And I work in mixed medium. So, that's the interesting thing is that I actually couldn't have done this book if I did it in my usual technique because there just wasn't enough time. So I invented all these techniques. And it was actually quite a great learning experience. People may call me nuts for saying this, but the best thing that ever happened to me in my life was being completely incapacitated and having to do this challenge anyway, because I found these ways to do things I never would have invented otherwise. Never in a million years I wouldn't have thought to do it.
Because you're forced to think out of the box.
You're forced, and necessity is the mother of invention, absolutely. So
what technologies did you learn that you wouldn't have learned otherwise?
Oh, I learned all this stuff in the computer. Like, for instance, like daytime and nighttime scenes. Now, in the process that I usually use, I use colored pencil and watercolor and gouache, and I build things up in layers so that it takes quite a while. I work sculpturally. Everything's like very, you know, the objects are very dimensional. And it would take me, I mean, it took me a while to do the cover. I did the cover without the effect. And it took me like 2 weeks to do the cover, and then I realized, oh, I only have 2.5 days for each illustration. This isn't going to work. So I figured out a way to do illustrations where the best example of it is this one right here, where this is actually an illustration where it's a very daytime illustration. And then afterwards, what I did is I dropped in a screen of blue-violet color, hit the multiply button in Photoshop so that it was transparent, and erased like the light parts out of the blue-violet screen so that the fire glows because everything else is still behind the blue-violet screen and it's revealed. So I developed this way of getting glowing colors. Instead of developing it by hand over weeks, I did it in Photoshop.
What about computers?
Too many people, and I really have to say this, too many people who do illustration computers, they don't even know how to draw, most of them. It's really sad. I can't tell you the number of illustrators that I know who cannot draw. And it's because they're completely reliant on, I went to a children's book conference, and this, I won't mention any names, but this one illustrator that I've admired for years, they said, oh, well, first of all, my wife goes through and picks out all these things, and then traces them, and then I develop them. And I go, ah, you mean you can't draw? I mean, I would not admit this to anyone if I were, you know, but there are illustrators who cannot draw.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't use the computer like that, though. I use it to enhance things.
Right, and I try to tell, like when it first came out, I was one of those artists that were like, oh, people are going to be, everybody's going to be able to illustrate now. Well, that's not true.
No, it isn't true.
If you can illustrate, then you can illustrate.
That's true.
And then just the computer's just going to make stuff pop.
Well, yeah, exactly. And people who, like, for instance, I mean, even with tracing, I have to give it to the guy who traces his stuff, is that somebody who is not an illustrator or an artist, you can trace something, but you can't develop it.
Right.
You can't develop a sense of form, a sense of color, give it life, you know, you can't do that. So it takes an artist.
There's so many different elements. There's composition, there's form, there's light. Like you said, there's layers and layers and layers.
Right, and the thing is, too, is that there's something that comes through of you in these things, and it comes from acquiring a magnetic center, is what I like to call it, over a long period of time, you know. As a matter of fact, this is a story I like to tell, the story of 200 dogs, because this is how, I do animals, you know, pretty well at this point, but I used to have a problem getting life into them, right? And then one summer, when I was totally broke, wondering how I was going to pay my mortgage, no job, I wake up one morning and I hear a voice in my head, and the voice says, Catherine, I want you to draw 200 dogs.
Did you tell it to go away?
What? And it came again. It said, Catherine, I want you to draw 200 dogs. And I said, okay. And I tried to ignore this voice, looking for work and stuff like that, but the voice would not go away. So I know by now that when those voices won't go away, no matter what, you've got to follow the voices. So I proceeded to draw 200 dogs. And it was not until dog number 187 that I realized why 200 dogs. It's because when you do anything that many times and you concentrate on it over and over and over again, something in it becomes fixed. It's like programming a computer. We're all computers that can be programmed. And after that many dogs, something in me became programmed. And I got past the point where it was no longer just eye-hand coordination. The spirit of those animals came alive to me. And it's like my roommate would like here, I would be talking to these dogs while I was drawing. They were so alive to me. I was like, oh, you, I know you. I'd be sitting there and then, laughing. And my roommate would be going, who are you talking to?
There she goes again.
There
right?
she goes again. Yeah, but you know what? I found this out from talking with another one of my friends, Liz McGrath, who's a very good illustrator. She talks to her critters too, And I've realized this from talking to a lot of children's book illustrators. We talk to our critters.
I talk to my invisible characters all the time.
I know. I mean, if you could see me, I work at home out of my own studio, right? Is my studio silent all day? No. Why? Because I'm walking around.
Because it's full of people that aren't really there.
I'm talking all day long to invisible people, you know. I answer questions out loud that nobody actually asks me, but, you know, it's like, but this is how it works, you know. Who am I talking to?
You're talking to one of your many selves, the aspects of yourself.
That's right.
Who then you develop into characters, who then go into books, who enrich people's lives.
There you go. That's how it happens.
It's all for good.
That's right.
And, you know, we're not totally nuts. We're doing something for the better, to better the community.
My sister once said something that I think was very, very, very intelligent. She said, insanity is economically defined. And you know what? That is so true, because if you can make a living off of your hallucinations, nobody calls you crazy.
That's so true.
They go, isn't he or she creative?
No, then they're brilliant.
Then they're brilliant.
First they're crazy, then they're creative, and then, oh my goodness, they're brilliant.
That's right.
They weren't crazy all this time.
Right. But the trick is you have to bring these things out of your head. The people who don't bring them out of their head, that's when it becomes the voices in your head.
Yes.
Yes.
Put them on the page.
Yes. Got to watch out for those people.
This is true. So aside of Christmas Cats, you have other books. Which ones are those?
Well, the first two books I did were for a company called Me Genius. They're an online publisher. When I first started working for them, they weren't online now. Now they're becoming very big. And I did two books for them, Jemima Puddle Duck and The Mouse and the Lion. Oh, you know what's really funny about Jemima Puddle Duck is Beatrix Potter did Jemima Puddle Duck. I'm a big fan of hers, and her and I have the same birthday.
What's your birthday?
July 28th. And she died exactly 10 years before I was born. And you know what is so funny? When you look at pictures of my mother as a little girl and Beatrix Potter as a little girl, they are identical. They could be identical twins.
That's a little creepy.
It's a little weird and creepy.
But it's cute at the same time.
Yes, yes, I channel Beatrix Potter.
That's great. So you did you write those stories, or did
No,
you illustrate
Beatrix
them?
Potter wrote them.
No, not those stories. You said you did two other books. Stories.
Well, those were the Jemima Puddle Duck and the Mouse and the Lion are classical books that I just re-illustrated for
You
Me
re-illustrated
Genius.
those. I thought those sounded familiar.
Yes.
Those are Beatrix Potter books.
The Jemima Puddle Duck, the Mouse and the Lion is just like an Aesop's fable.
Right.
Yep. But the third book I did was Winston the Water Dog by a local author, Mary Corr, who's a journalist.
I have read that book.
Yes, yes. And that book actually won the Mom's Choice Award.
Yes, it did.
And I got that book because of doing 200 Dogs.
See,
It's
it all
true.
came full circle.
It came full circle. Right after I finished the 200 Dogs, I saw her advertisement looking for someone to illustrate a dog book, and I applied, and she chose me because I did dogs better than anybody else that she'd interviewed.
That is so cool.
So see, listen to those voices in your head.
I'll try not to tell them to be quiet anymore.
Yeah.
No, I usually, when I get those voices, I paint them out of my head. I get them out because they can't stay there.
No.
There's not enough room in there for those voices.
No, it's bad to have voices in your head. Got to get them out.
So what are your plans to do from here?
Well, I just submitted one of the books that I wrote myself.
Mm-hmm.
What Does a Doggy Do All Day?
Doggies?
Yeah, doggies. Doggies. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so doing that. Also, I mean, I'm a model maker. I'm actually going into the studio this spring with some people from my first all-woman band in Buffalo that we played together like, what, oh my God, how many years ago is it now? Hate to think, like 40 years ago.
Wow. You don't look that old, I have to say.
Oh, well, thank you. Feel that old. Going to be 60 next year.
Wow. You carry it well?
Oh, thank you.
Must be all the art.
That's the yoga.
The yoga and the art.
I live like I'm training for the Olympics.
That's
and
good.
I have a grandson.
It's a good way to live.
Taiwan.
Your sons and grandsons? I'm sorry, your grandson's in Taiwan?
They're in Taiwan, yes.
That's a long way to go to visit.
Long way to go. I get to see them like maybe once a year. I hope I'm going over there in a month because my son just opened a pizza restaurant. It's not enough like my son. I'm so proud of my son. He's an attorney.
Wow.
And he's an international baseball scout for the Kansas City Royals.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Now, is your son anything like my son where he says, I don't want to be an artist because my mother is?
Oh, God, my son has been embarrassed about everything I've done.
Okay.
He was hideously embarrassed when I was in a rock band. It's like I used to run around on stage in a miniskirt with the big hair and everything, and his friends would go, "Oh, Nathan, your mom's hot," and he'd go, "Oh, God."
Oh, see, my son loves that. So, but he didn't want to go the artist route.
Oh,
you know.
yeah, no. I think I've been embarrassing my son for a long time.
But he still loves you.
He likes the children's book. My grandson likes the children's.
See that?
books.
All that embarrassment, and now he's reading this book to his kid.
Yes,
Isn't that
yes. I
great?
dedicated this one to Jackson.
Jackson is
Jackson's
your
my,
son?
my adorable grandson.
Oh,
No,
your
my
grandson.
son's name is Nathan.
Nathan? Okay.
Yep.
Very nice. So you only have one?
Only have one. Yeah.
That's okay. One's enough.
Yeah. Well, hey, he can have kids, so
This is true.
I hope to have many grandchildren.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week to see our interview with A.C. Goggin. And if there's an author or illustrator that you'd like to see here at the Story Emporium, be sure to visit our website at thestoryemporium.org and email us. We'll do our best to get that author or illustrator on the show, because here at the Story Emporium, all characters are welcome.